It is hard to make subjective judgment about who is right in a conflict. Both Israel and Hamas have their perspective and narrative. However, the preponderance of evidence can support only one to have the moral right. I'm worried this war may escalate into a global conflict. I have also been traumatized since October 7th by my own personal experience that I will share with you later. I'm uniquely qualified to present evidence with a high degree of certainty because I have 42 years of clinical psychological evaluation and treatment and 26 years of teaching at graduate level. If you ask me what does psychology has to do with Israeli-Hamas war, I'll show you later how individuals contribute and create group, community, national and international crisis. My approach is based on science and verifiable facts. I'm not drawn by either emotion or affiliations. I'm a student of history. History is the greatest teacher. Any war or conflict that happens now, a similar conflict has happened before and will happen again. And finally, I'm from the Middle East myself and have been to Gaza, West Bank and Israel. Most important, I understand Middle Eastern mentality. My aim is to shed light on this truly misunderstood war. There is so much misinformation and ignorance about this war that's mind-boggling. All the information you need to judge moral rightness is available with a little effort if you care to know the truth. This is my humble attempt at bringing clarity and light to this topic. In short, I wish to show you why you should stop relying on your senses and feelings that are the basis of your judgment about this war, and why you should keep neutral. Here are the key points. Jews have lived in Greater Israel for over 3,000 years. The historical roots can be summarized as follows. Ancient period, Jews settled in Israel during biblical times with Jerusalem as the capital of the United Kingdom of Israel under King David and King Solomon. Hellenistic and Roman period, 332 BCE to 70 CE. Israel came under Greek and then Roman rule. The Maccabees revolted, but Jerusalem was eventually conquered in 63 BCE by the Romans. Then is the Roman and Byzantine period from 70 CE to 636 CE. The Romans destroyed the Second Temple in 70 CE due to strong Jewish resistance. Christianity spread in the region. And then next is the Islamic conquest from 636 to 1517. Muslim armies conquered Palestine in 636 CE. Control of Palestine alternated between Muslim and Christian rulers during the Crusade. The Ottoman Empire ruled the region from 1517 until about 1918, when they had to relinquish it to France and Britain after their disastrous defeat in World War I. And then the modern period. From 19th century to present, Jewish immigration to Israel increased significantly in the 19th century due to Zionist and religious aspiration, Jews gradually acquired big chunks of land in the sparsely populated Israel by purchasing land from the Ottomans and later from Arabs piece by piece. The State of Israel was finally established in 1948 and was attacked from all sides by Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, leading to the first Arab-Israeli conflict. Jews needed labor for cultivation of the land, building houses, schools, industries, roads, hospitals, and other development. So they brought thousands of Arabs from all over Palestine for over 100 years to work and build the bare uninhabited land. So in fact, most of the Arabs in Israel today are descendants of migrants who came to work and inhabit the land of now Israel. The roots of this conflict are just over 100 years old. It started in about 1900 by, first, the Zionist movement, which finally concluded that Jews need to have their own country to survive. Jews have had a love and affinity towards Israel and Jerusalem and consider it their ancestral land. Diaspora Jews have been reciting next year in Jerusalem, B'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim, during Passover for the past 2,000 years. To forget Jerusalem is likened to forgetting your right hand in the Bible. Im eshkach Yerushalayim eshkach yemini. No such sentiment exists in any other religion. Then Jewish immigration due to centuries of pogroms and oppression of Jews in Russia and Eastern Europe. And finally, large purchases of land from the Ottomans and later directly from Arabs from 1800 to 1948. Okay. Moral issues have been debated for millennia. Aristotle is considered one of the most influential philosophers in history because he wrote about human behavior and morality and is well known for his virtue ethics, an ethical theory that primarily emphasizes the character of the moral agent themselves rather than the morality of their actions. Jonathan Haidt, a prominent social psychologist, has authored several enlightening books, with two particularly noteworthy ones. The Righteous Mind is renowned for popularizing the moral foundations theory. The second one, The Coddling of the American Mind, delves into the consequences of excessive caution in parenting and education, arguing that it instills fear and aversion to challenging ideas in children. Haidt and his co-author identify three great untruths perpetuating this trend linked to rising mental health issues among students. Part 2 of the book examines campus protest, where students justify violence against controversial speakers, citing feelings of physical threat from offensive words. Universities that used to be the bastion of knowledge, wisdom, liberty, and freedom have become dens of oppressive ideologies. Political correctness reigns supreme, and all else is denied or rejected, and where 2 plus 2 is equal 22. Throughout history, moral absolutism prevailed, with principles like thou shalt not kill forming the foundations of morality. However, in 1932, Edward Westermarck introduced moral relativism in his book Ethics Are Relative, leading to a significant shift in moral standards. Today, moral relativism dominates Western ethics, influencing culture, politics, and international relations by asserting that moral judgments are relative to cultural or individual standards rather than universal principles. In the era of post-truth politics, where emotions outweigh facts, moral relativism further blurs the line between right and wrong. Despite cultural differences, evolutionary ethics suggests a universally shared moral faculty among humans, rooted in our evolutionary heritage, challenging the notion of moral relativism. This is solely based on my own clinical experience, observing that many patients suffer from emotional issues like anxiety and depression due to lack of emotional resilience. The current view is that life should be easy and problem-free. This has led to a generation ill-equipped to handle stress. Excessive and prolonged stress can be harmful. However, stress can also be beneficial when managed properly. Buddha's fourth noble truth is life is full of stress and problems. Moral relativism has paralyzed Western societies and distorted the views of our policymakers' response to conflict like those in the Middle East. I'm worried. This war may escalate into a global conflict, Russia and China potentially intervening when it suits them best. The process of becoming emotional after exposure to violent news clips of Israeli-Hamas war on TV or social media involves several psychological and physiological steps, including perception, emotional response, sympathy, physiological reactions, cognitive processing, and behavioral response. When responding to wars or conflicts like the Israeli-Hamas war, individuals can form opinions or judgment, but should exercise caution when expressing them publicly to avoid spreading false information or inciting harm. It's important to recognize that a man with every one of his word, thought, and actions sets an influence. This influence is not bound nor restricted. It goes on and on until it reaches every layer of creation. This is what my Guru Maharishi taught me. Emotions are reservoir of our energy, well-being, and overall vitality, significantly impacting cognition, behavior, and decision-making. It's essential to educate and regulate our emotions for mastering a balanced and harmonious life and to prevent them from spiraling out of control and causing various emotional problems. Unlike children, adults are expected to manage their emotions, particularly anxiety and anger, in socially acceptable ways. Failures to control emotions can lead to regrettable actions and behaviors. Our senses and feelings often shape our judgments about events, yet they can be deceptive. Even when you feel completely certain about what you have experienced, our senses and emotions can mislead us. Various disorders highlight the fallibility of sensory information. Misophonia involve auditory sensitivity, while phantosmia and hyperosmia affect the sense of smell. Dysgeusia pertains to taste disturbance, and disorders of touch can alter tactile sensations. Visual disorders further demonstrate how our interpretation of stimuli can be distorted, leading to hallucination or pseudo-hallucinations. There is a parallel in what happens to us individually because the same happens on national and international level. I will give you a few examples of the type of problems and complaints I hear from my patients that should illustrate my point. I asked a patient upon arrival, "What can I do for you?" He replied, "It's the vibration that bother me. They are driving me crazy." I asked him, "Why do you think your medical doctor has sent you to me?" He innocently replied, "I guess you must be a vibration specialist." Another client complains about her bathroom having a nauseating smell. Another patient complains of the smell of mold and says that she cannot let her son sleep in that bedroom because of the dangers of mold. In each instance, the perceived problem did not align with reality, despite the patient's conviction. There was no actual issue with vibrations, foul odors, or mold. Despite this, the discomfort experienced by each individual was undeniably real for them. Heightened sensory perceptions often serve as indicators of underlying emotional distress, though organic causes cannot be discounted. As a clinician, my duty is to discern the true source of the problem, addressing it at its root rather than where it is perceived to exist. These anecdotes highlight how individuals can misconstrue the origin of their personal maladies, underscoring the importance of a correct diagnosis and treatment. If we can be mistaken about issues so close to us, it raises the question about our understanding of larger scale problems. Historical examples like Neville Chamberlain's misjudgment of Hitler and the French withdrawal from Saarland before World War II illustrate how nations can misdiagnose issues, leading to a world war with 80 million loss of lives. It is therefore extremely important to identify the source of the problem to make a correct judgment about who is at fault in this war. Moral judgment is a serious responsibility reserved for qualified individuals with legal and historical expertise and experience. Can you demand a ceasefire or hostage release as most protesters do in this war? Frankly, what right or qualifications do you have regarding the geography, culture, and historical events of the Middle East over the last 150 years? Or do you think your charged raw emotions are sufficient to entitle you to know what's morally right or wrong? As most protesters are university students' age group, please be reminded that Gen Z brain is still developing. Additionally, many, including millennials and even older protesters, are beset by emotional problems such as anxiety, depression, and PTSD that influences, alters, and affects your opinion and judgment. It is crucial to recognize and address your own emotional baggage first and foremost, before you try to help anybody else, because it impacts your well-being and ability to make fair and sound judgments significantly. More importantly, you make a grave mistake in your judgment if you have not learned the difference between pity, sympathy, and empathy, and how each one of them changes in subtle ways your perception by affecting your emotions and judgment. Emotions and feelings are distinct. Emotions are instinctive physiological responses, while feelings involve conscious interpretation influenced by personal experience and beliefs. Emotions can influence how we perceive reality, but feelings may be distorted by past events or future fears. To be moral means to disconnect from emotionally charged stories and facing realities. Emotional response is not sufficient to solve problems and crises. The solution requires sophistication far beyond emotions. Feeling mercy towards a suffering Palestinian woman or an abducted Israeli child doesn't make you ethical or moral. Or feeling pity for Palestinians doesn't equate to expertise in deciding complex issues and demanding change in foreign policy of Hamas or Israel, as many protesters are demanding. The subconscious plays a significant role in emotional response such as empathy, sympathy, or pity, particularly in the context of the Israeli-Hamas war. The sympathizer behavior may be influenced by subconscious feelings of superiority, leading to unintentional condescension. This subtle sense of superiority can arise when expressing pity or sympathy for the weak or underprivileged, and it often goes unnoticed by those experiencing it. Allow me to illustrate the consequences of excessive identification and oversympathy towards people over time and how we are harming rather than helping them. Consider the situation faced by Haitian people and Palestinian refugees from Gaza and West Bank. The Palestinians have been in refugee camps since 1948, their lives still in limbo with an unemployment rate of 50%. Additionally, they lack incentive to move forward because they have relied on UN handouts and foreign assistance ever since 1948. Despite international attention and sympathy by Western people and governments, their miserable situation persists. The cycle of dependency on foreign aid continues as they lack the means to build sustainable livelihood. All the Western government's good intention have literally disabled all these refugees and arrested their social, vocational, and creative developments. Haiti, a nation marked by chronic dysfunction, has faced immense challenges over the past several decades. Political instability, natural disasters, and economic struggles have left the country vulnerable. Currently, Haiti grapples with criminal gang violence, adding further to their woes. Instead of empowering these people to become self-sufficient, we have often provided short-term aid without addressing long-term development. Like giving fish rather than teaching fishing, we have perpetuated dependency rather than fostering self-reliance. Both Haiti and Palestinians rely heavily on foreign financial assistance and civic support. While aid is essential during current crisis, it must be complemented by efforts to build local capacity, education, and sustainable infrastructure. In summary, striking a balance between empathy and empowerment is crucial. Your behavior, cognition, and whose side you support can determine who you are, your personality, and your mental health. Is condescension or feeling of superiority driving your support for Hamas or Palestinians? Or are you genuinely able to feel solidarity, understand and share their misery of the refugees? If the answer is the former, please see a psychotherapist. You really need help. If your answer is the latter, don't you have any similar sympathy for the suffering of other humans all over the world right now? Croatians, 100,000 dead and 10 million refugees all over Europe. 2 million Afghans were recently thrown out of Pakistan. Over 400,000 dead Yemenis and about 17 million Yemenis that need emergency assistance according to UN report. And the list goes on and on. Wars in Ethiopia, Yemen, South Sudan, Somalia, and Eritrea, with another 300,000 dead and millions of refugees. What about the humanitarian catastrophe in Afghanistan, Myanmar, deepening political crisis, global power standoff over Ukraine, Taiwan, and Iran's nuclear program? How come none of these crises catch your fancy or attention? To all you protesters, young and old, please listen to this verse from the Quran. Men arafati nafsan arafati rabban. If this does not open your mind and heart, nothing will. The direct translation is, whoever knows himself, he knows God. The statement highlights the Quranic notion that self-awareness is fundamental to uncovering truth and understanding the divine. If you are driven by emotion or affiliation, your perceptions and judgments are flawed, distorted, and plain wrong. Please lift the veil of blindness and ignorance by stopping your sentimental emotions of pity and sympathy. Our statesmen and lawmakers have done enough damage already by fostering laziness, lower self-esteem, and dependency in many parts of the world rather than enabling and promoting independence, creativity, and self-reliance, particularly in Haiti and Palestine. There is a worldwide protest. Israel is called genocidal, apartheid, oppressive, and much more. The question is, are we really pointing the finger at the right culprit? Let's look at these charges one by one and then decide who is right. The first, Israel is genocidal. The loss of lives, destruction of properties in the war against Hamas is undeniable. Then how could you wage a war without collateral damage, knowing that Hamas hides in residential areas, schools, mosques, hospitals, and later these so-called freedom fighters melt into civilian population because they wear civilian and not military clothes? Look at the census published by Palestinian Central Bureau of Statistics and US Census Bureau about the Palestinian population. The table shows the population of West Bank and Gaza increased by 550% from 1,030,000 in 1970 to 5.6 million today. This statistic shows another interesting story. The birth rate amongst Palestinians after Israeli occupation increased significantly in West Bank and Gaza. Generally, birth rate increase when people are happier and financially better off. Additionally, if Israel is genocidal, how did the Arab Israelis grow from 160,000 in 1948 to over 2 million today? Stealing land. Jews started immigrating from 1800 to 1940s to Israel. Jews bought their land piece by piece, first from the Ottomans and later from Arabs, who were too eager to sell their land for big profits. These land purchases by immigrants and Jewish institutions and agencies continued for over 140 years. When Israel was finally established in 1948, Jews owned a large and sizable chunk of land. Jews did not steal any land, and any land they acquired was either purchased or won through war. It is stated that 700,000 Arabs became refugees when the State of Israel was established in 1948. And therefore these people have the right to return to the land of Israel. Where are all these people now? All in refugee camps, and their number has grown to 5.5 million. Why are they still in refugee camps? 57 Muslim countries and 22 Arab countries, only a very few of them accept any Palestinian. Iran, Yemen, or Hezbollah, who seemingly want to go to war with Israel, have not taken even one Palestinian. The worst part, Palestinians living in Kuwait, in the Qatar, and other states still considered mostly refugees and are not permitted to become citizens in most Arab countries. Do you ask yourself why? The Palestinians were encouraged by Arab statesmen to leave their home, and they left voluntarily, despite Ben-Gurion's plea for them to stay in 1948. They were not forced out by the Israelis. There is one interesting question nobody asked. What happened to the 800,000 Jewish refugees that were actually thrown out of Morocco, Algeria, Iraq, Jordan, Yemen, Egypt, and Tunisia after Israel's declaration of independence? exact same time that Palestinians allegedly became refugees. Where are those people now? They are all settled and thriving in France, Israel, England, USA, and other countries. Are there any Jews in Morocco, Algeria, Iraq, Yemen, Egypt, and Tunisia now? None, maybe a handful or so. History is a great teacher because it repeats itself forever. During conflicts or wars, people move, get displaced, forcibly removed, or become collateral damage. India and Pakistan partition caused 1 million deaths and several million refugees, both Muslim and Hindus. When Russia was advancing from the east in World War II, millions of Germans flee because they feared reprisal of the advancing Russians. Last year, 1 million Armenians moved out of Nagorno-Karabakh in Armenia just because of fear of Azerbaijanis. Nobody forced them out. About 150,000 Iranian Jews left Iran voluntarily because they did not feel safe in Iran anymore. There wasn't any war. It is alleged that Israel has a system of legalized racial segregation that denies its Arab citizens their civil and political rights. 160,000 Palestinians did not leave Israel and stayed in 48. The number exceeds 2 million today. They live with equal rights in a vibrant democracy. Many have achieved high positions: members of parliament, Supreme Court judge, most popular actor, etc. Interestingly, they are the only Arab not protesting Israel. Israel should stop the war or cease fire, they say. Why is nobody asking Hamas to stop hiding in schools, mosques, hospitals, and residential areas? This alone will completely stop all of the civilian death. Why nobody asks Hamas to lay down their arms so the war is over immediately? There was a ceasefire on October 6th, but Hamas broke it. Then some claim two-state solution. Politicians and proponents of the two-state solution sincerely believe it will solve all the region's problems and peace will and should prevail. The protesters too believe that once Palestine is a free and separate country, Gaza and West Bank will prosper like Singapore and become the promised land of the new utopia. Well, respectfully, the facts tell quite a different story. Israel withdrew from southern Lebanon in May 2000 and it was free. What did Israel get in return? A peace treaty? No, creation of Hezbollah with Iran's help, with its rockets and missiles to wreak havoc on Israel instead. Israel withdrew from Gaza in September 2005. What did Israel get? Peace offers? No, Hamas with a charter to annihilate all the Israelis and Jews. There are 57 Muslim countries with a population of 1.6 billion and one Jewish state of 9 million. The proportion is about 1 Jewish to 180 Muslims. What these 57 countries have achieved in the last 100 years in terms of art, science, education, IT, and invention. Jews were awarded over 250 Nobel Prizes so far. How many Nobel Prizes have been awarded to these so-called 57 Muslim countries? Have you ever heard any of these 57 countries condemn any terrorist attack committed by fellow Muslims throughout the world in US, UK, France, Spain, Norway, Israel, Russia, and more? By the way, don't you think it's strange that none of the 57 countries have tried or are willing to accept any Palestinian, not even one? There is no democracy and no freedom of speech in any of these 57 countries. Women that comprise at least 51% of the population are mostly considered the property of man who can do whatever he wishes with them. Kill or burn her to safeguard the family's honor if necessary. This happens even in Turkey, which considers itself European. Women have very little to no right, cannot drive, travel, or work without the permission of a male figure in many Muslim countries. Majority of these Muslim countries have totalitarian regimes with restricted or no freedom of speech. Majority of the people in these 57 so-called free countries live in poverty. A few that are rich is because of the oil, not because of their industries, inventions, and sophisticated ITs. Colonial occupier. There are historical archaeological evidence of Jews living in Israel for over 3,000 years. Look at the Roman soldiers carrying a menorah after the defeat of Israel by the Romans almost 2,000 years ago. You can find that in the Arch of Titus in Rome. Overacting and disproportionate response. No one expected the US to stop or cease fire when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. Did America hesitate to bomb the hell out of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan after 9/11? Didn't we annihilate the Nazis and destroy Germany and Japan? And what did we do to ISIS in Fallujah, Iraq? Argentina attacked and occupied Falkland. Did it stop UK from defending it from 8,000 miles away until Argentinians finally surrendered? Hamas is next door to Israel, and why should Israel live with the threat of terrorism on its border? Hamas has repeatedly declared it will do October 7 again and again if it could. Why should Israel cease fire or stop now? Who are the true Palestinians? Philistine used to be the sworn enemy of the Jews long ago. The name Philistine, later Romanized as Palestina, is a pejorative name given by the Romans as an insult to Jews about 2,000 years ago due to the Jewish strong resistance to Roman domination. The story of Masada makes a very good, interesting read. The only nation that could possibly bear the name Palestinian are the Jews. Since they have adopted the name Israel, they have no claim to the name Palestinian. By the way, the name Palestinian was first used by Yasser Arafat in 1967 for political reason and has never been officially uttered by anyone else before then. Look at the coin from 1927. It bears the name Palestine in Arabic and English and Hebrew with an acronym Land of Israel in parentheses. Some cultures are better at addressing life's day-to-day challenges. I may be politically incorrect, but truthfully, I find many practices in my own culture that I disapprove of. The practice of human sacrifice was deeply ingrained in Aztec religious belief and rituals. Such religious beliefs and rituals are not approved or practiced anymore. There is a testimony by Professor Aryeh Eldad, a renowned Israeli burn physician. He wrote his experience of treating successfully a young Palestinian girl burned by her father. Once she got healed after many visits to Hadassah Hospital, she attempted to return to the same hospital with a suicide vest jacket to kill the hospital staff. Fortunately, she was caught before she had a chance to blow herself up. The full testimony is included in the addendum. A culture that dares to write a charter called Hamas Charter. The culture that devalues half of its population, the woman. The culture that its mufti shows you on public TV how to beat your wife. I'm not kidding you. It really happened in 2016. The culture that imprisons and tortures its own people for any political, non-approved speech or activity. The culture that builds 500 kilometers of tunnels with the intention of committing acts of terror instead of building roads, highways, factories, and industries. The European Union built a completely new water system in Gaza due to water shortage. Hamas dug up all the water pipes from the ground and used them to build rockets and missiles. The culture that has high rate of domestic violence and wife beating and blames Israel as the cause of wife beating. Again, I'm not kidding. The culture that majority of Palestinians, about 80%, wholeheartedly agree with the atrocities committed by Hamas on October 7. Is there any difference between Hamas and Palestinian people then? None of the massacres of civilians, burning of people alive, raping of women, burning of babies, beheading of soldiers is described as virtue in any book or tradition I am familiar with. The problem is deeper than culture. While Christianity and Judaism went through reform, Islam did not. It seems nobody dares or is willing to bring up the subject of reform until recently. Let me share with you a personal experience. When I was about 11 years old, every time I passed an alley to go to see my cousin, Muslim kids ganged up on me and beat me up. I didn't know any of those kids, and they didn't know me. I don't know how they knew I'm Jewish. When, where, and how those 11-year-old Muslim kids learned to hate Jews over 50 years ago in Tehran, Iran. Getting beaten by Muslims was so common that I never shared this incident with anyone. When I finally shared it with my brother a few days ago, he told me the following story. He gathered a few young Jewish boys to play a soccer game with the Muslim kids in the same alley. The match ended with 3-0 in favor of the Jewish boys. The Muslim kids then started name-calling and suddenly began to attack the Jewish boys. I swear I heard this story for the first time just a few days ago, even though it happened over 50 years ago. My brother never shared it with me or anyone. Getting beaten and abused by Muslims was so common that we took it for granted and stopped complaining about it. My experience as a grown-up is that anti-Semitism is endemic within Islam. Karen Armstrong has written over 100 books about religion and half a dozen books about Islam. She has concluded that there is a need for reform in Islam. Christianity and Judaism went through reform a couple of hundred years ago. Many Muslim scholars have also written about reform and believe Islam cannot be reformed or changed. Overall, religion and culture intertwine to shape worldviews, societal norms, and collective identities, contributing to the diverse tapestry of human cultures. I should also acknowledge the contribution of Islam for 500 years during the golden age of Islam in Spain. Hopefully this will foster discussion that are both constructive and inclusive, contributing to greater harmony. The Islamic Golden Age, spanning from 8th to 14th century, was marked by remarkable advancement in art, science, and culture. Islamic calligraphy, intricate geometric patterns, and arabesque designs adorned mosques and manuscripts, architecture, and textile. In mathematics, scholars like Al-Khwarizmi pioneered algebra, while in astronomy, figures like Al-Batani refined Greek models. Ibn Sina Medical Encyclopedia influenced European medicine and was the medical textbook in European universities for centuries. Arabic literature flourished and philosophers like Avicenna and Averroes contributed to philosophical thought, acting as a hub for trade and cultural exchange. The Islamic world facilitated the interchange of goods and ideas between East and West. This period exemplified a flourishing of intellect and creativity, leaving a lasting impact on subsequent civilizations and laying the groundwork for modern science and culture. Jewish-American documentary maker Amy Horowitz highlighted recently how bad anti-Semitism on American campuses has become. In the video, Horowitz goes to San Francisco State University in California and asks students if they support the attacks against Jewish soft targets and who would be willing to give money to support each attack. Horowitz presents himself as a representative fundraising for attacks on Jews. In the video, 2/3 of the students are willing to give moral support to his message, while half were willing to give money to the cause, despite specifically being told that the targets would include synagogues, schools, cafes, hospitals, and other clearly civilian targets. In his conversation, Horowitz does not say the attacks are planned against Israeli soft targets, but Jewish ones, and states that the targets would be in places like Europe, England, and the United States. In your perception, you ascribe to me as a Jewish man a pedestal, elevating me to a status reserved for the few, the chosen people. This puts a weighty burden on me, subjecting me to a distinct and heightened scrutiny. While I appreciate the sentiment, I decline such preferential treatment. Thanks, but no thanks. I beg you instead to regard me as one among equals, subject to the same standards and expectations as any other individual. I would be fine if you didn't treat me with prejudice, you don't abuse me, and don't want to wipe me off the face of the earth, as the rallying cries of millions echo from the river to the sea implies. History bears witness to a lamentable truth. The Jewish people have endured the public shame and disgrace of being cast as society's perennial punching bag and scapegoat for over 2,000 years. Amidst the tumult of political discord, economic turmoil, and the ravages of war, the Jewish people has been habitually accused and blamed, from the distressing pogroms of Russia to the repulsive atrocities of the Nazi regime. The Jews have borne the brunt of unfounded accusation and malevolent persecution. The widespread blame has haunted the Jewish communities across the world, from the subtle attribution of communism and atom bomb to the ever portrayal of Jewish power and influence in politics, finance, entertainment, and everything else in between. Such unfounded accusations have served not only to demonize a people, but also to perpetuate a cycle of baseless hatred and division. Yet the Jewish people have oftentimes borne such poisonous hostility with their stoic resilience rather than any proactive defense. This is a testament to the Jewish faith and adherence to principles of peace that they have deliberately avoided retaliation in favor of endurance. But should this restraint be mistaken for acceptance of injustice? Can the weight of historical misfortune truly be laid at the feet of a people whose only crime is being Jewish? Indeed, it is a sad reflection on the state of societal well-being that the treatment of Jews has often served as a barometer of collective mental health. Like the proverbial canary in the gold mine, the experience of the Jewish people serves as an indicator of underlying maladies within the broader social fabric. For when violence, whether verbal or physical, becomes the weapon of choice against a marginalized group, it is indicative of a deeper emotional malaise that afflicts the perpetrators rather than the victims. Isn't the time yet ripe to acknowledge the enduring misfortunes of the Jewish communities, perennial targets of unwarranted aggression and senseless violence? in recent times, there has been a noticeable surge in anti-Semitism, both in its blatant and subtle forms, coinciding with the outbreak of the Israeli-Hamas war. This prompts us to ponder the emotional state of individuals amidst these communities. I can affirm that since the onset of COVID, there has been a significant surge in the frequency, diversity, and intensity of emotional disorders. Never before have I encountered so many patients and other individuals grappling with such a multitude of problems, both within my professional practice as well as in my social circles. People and governments globally are caught up in the sentimentality of pity and sympathy for the poor suffering Palestinians by the video clips of news on TV and social media. That's fair and understandable. You could forgive Hamas for doing a stupid mistake. But how can you forget Hamas' repeated claims it will do it over and over again if it could? Secondly, majority of Palestinians agree with Hamas atrocities. Therefore, there is no distinction between Hamas and Palestinians, who celebrated the atrocities of October 7th with pride and distributed candies. Thirdly, how can you deny what is in the Hamas charter concerning obliteration of every Jew from the face of the earth? Finally, the world and the West is completely blind to how endemic is anti-Semitism in Islam. Furthermore, anti-Semitism is additionally promoted and taught to children in schools, including military training from infancy to high school in both West Bank and Gaza, Palestine. I believe the Israelis are overreacting in this war because of trauma and shock by their own negligence and arrogance of October 7th. Israelis are wounded and enraged. The wound and rage are their own making. The Israeli government has known and dealt with Hamas for past 18 years and knew about Hamas' barbaric intention for years. However, Israelis failed to nip the problem in the bud and instead content themselves with an attitude of arrogance and assurance that their so-called iron wall, equipped with all and the latest electronic gadget, is impenetrable and it will protect them. So the wound is self-inflicted and the rage is at themselves first and foremost, and then at Hamas. They are overreacting with charged emotion rather than responding to the crisis. Same thing happened in 9/11 in USA. I strongly believe Israel should stop this war with the condition that Hamas be completely defunded by the Western countries. Humanitarian help to Palestinians should increase by leaps and bounds to lessen their misery. Although it is hard to decide who is right in a conflict, the preponderance of evidence presented leaves no room for any doubt as to who has the moral right in this war. I have tried to give you a balanced and unbiased presentation based on historical, clinical, scientific, and personal facts, easily verifiable. This presentation is available for download if you wish to explore further. Thanks for watching or reading. Please remember this video is divided in many parts to make it shorter and easier to watch. Please follow them in numerical order. And leave me a thumbs up if you liked it or any constructive feedback. Thank you.